Graduation was supposed to be the best day of my life. 4 years of sleepless nights, part-time jobs, and constant pressure had finally paid off. I had worked harder than anyone I knew just to stand on that stage. Not because I was the smartest, but because I had something to prove. My parents never believed I would make it this far. To them, I was always the average one. The one who needed extra time, extra help, extra chances. My younger sister, Emma, on the other hand, was everything they were proud of. Top grades, scholarships, perfect in every way. At family gatherings, they talked about her future. With me, they talked about my potential. There's a difference. Still, I invited them to my graduation. I even saved them front row seats. Because no matter how they treated me,
I still wanted them to be proud.
the ceremony was long and exhausting.
My name was near the end of the list.
By the time they finally called it, my head was pounding. I remember standing up, my legs feeling strangely weak as I walked toward the stage. The lights felt too bright. The air felt too thin. But I kept going, because I had worked too hard to stop now. I shook the dean's hand, took the diploma, smiled for the camera, and then everything went black. The next thing I remember was a sharp beeping sound. Voices. Bright white lights. I was in a hospital bed. A nurse noticed I was awake and immediately called someone. "The patient is conscious," she said. Within minutes, a doctor walked in. "You collapsed due to extreme exhaustion and dehydration," he explained. "But we're running more tests to be sure." I nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. Then I asked the only question that mattered to me. "My parents, are they here?" The doctor hesitated for a moment. "We called them," he said carefully. That pause told me everything. Still, I waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. No one came. No messages. No calls. Nothing. I stared at the hospital door, hoping it would open, hoping they would walk in and prove me wrong. But deep down, I already knew. Then, just as I was about to give up, the door finally opened, and the person who walked in wasn't my parents. It was my grandfather. Grandpa looked like he had rushed straight from home. His shirt was slightly wrinkled, his hair uncombed, but his eyes were filled with something I hadn't seen from my parents in a long time.
Worry.
"There you are," he said softly, pulling a chair beside my bed. "You gave us quite a scare." I tried to smile. "You came." "Of course I came," he replied without hesitation. "Why wouldn't I?" I didn't answer, because the real question was, why didn't anyone else? Grandpa seemed to understand anyway. "They're busy," he said gently. I let out a quiet laugh. "Yeah," I said. "They always are." There was a moment of silence before he reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. An envelope. "I was going to give you this after the ceremony," he said. "But I think now is the right time." I frowned slightly. "What is it?" "Open it." Inside was a document. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw the title. Property Transfer Agreement. My heart skipped. "Grandpa, what is this?" He leaned back calmly. "It's yours," he said. "What is?" "The house. The one you grew up visiting every summer." I stared at him in shock. "But why?" He looked at me carefully. "Because you showed up," he said simply. I didn't understand. "For years, you were the only one who visited me without being asked. The only one who called just to talk. The only one who didn't treat me like an obligation." My throat tightened. "But Mom and Dad—" "They already know," he interrupted. That made my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Grandpa sighed quietly. "I told them last month that I planned to give the house to you. And they weren't happy." Of course they weren't. The house was valuable. Very valuable. "They said you weren't ready," Grandpa continued. "That you couldn't handle that kind of responsibility." I felt something twist in my chest. Even now, nothing had changed. "But I've watched you," Grandpa said firmly. "And I know exactly who you are." I looked down at the document again. My hands were slightly shaking. "They'll be angry," I said quietly. Grandpa gave a small smile. "They already are." At that exact moment, my phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up. Dozens of missed calls. All from my parents. And one message. Why didn't you tell us about the house? I slowly looked up at Grandpa. And that's when I realized something. They didn't come to the hospital for me.
But now,
They were finally paying attention. My phone kept buzzing. More messages. More calls. All from my parents. I finally answered. My father's voice came through immediately. Why didn't you tell us about the house? He demanded. No, are you okay? No, we heard you collapsed. Just the house. I closed my eyes for a moment. I just got out of the hospital, I said quietly. There was a brief pause. Then my mother spoke. We know, but that's not the point right now. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed everything. They hadn't come because I needed them. They were calling because they needed something. Grandpa gave it to me, I said calmly. That's not fair, my father snapped. We're his children. I looked over at Grandpa, who was quietly sitting beside me. Then I said something I never thought I would say. He gave it to the person who showed up. Silence. Heavy silence. Then my father's voice turned cold. You're making a mistake. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. No, I said. I'm finally seeing things clearly. And for the first time in my life, I ended the call first. Grandpa stayed with me the entire night. He didn't check his phone. He didn't rush out.
he just sat there.
Sometimes the people who matter most aren't the ones who are supposed to be there. They're the ones who actually show up. And that day, I finally understood the difference. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos. My suggestion, watch next.